Hello and welcome back to Greek Speaks. This week we are talking about Demeter, the goddess of grain, fertility, the harvest, pretty much anything having to do with agriculture, which is interesting because it's a solely human activity, meaning she's a solely human god. So like Artemis you have running away in the fields and Apollo having to do with the sun and stuff like that, but Demeter is purely human, which is interesting. The gods, that doesn't happen all that much. So the main myth about her is the myth surrounding Demeter, Hades, and Persephone, and Hades we'll talk about next week, and he's my favorite, so yay. The main idea of the myth is that Demeter and Zeus have a kid, and that kid is named Persephone, and once she becomes of age, Zeus is like, hey, you need to get married. And so Hades, it depends on the translation, but long story short, Zeus says, hey, Hades, lord of the underworld and the dead, you can marry my daughter. Without the permission of Demeter or Persephone, which is weird to us because we live in a more progressive society and it's kind of the permission of both parties when they get married. But this was common in the ancient world, and daughters slash women were property of either their father or their husband or their brother, whoever the closest male kin would be. So this kind of gives divine sanction for how that whole thing works. I should mention Hades is the son of Kronos and Rhea, meaning he is Persephone's uncle on both sides, both her mother and her father. Again, you just kind of get used to all the incest and mythology. It just is a thing. It's a thing, and nobody likes it, but it's a thing. So Zeus says, hey, you can marry my daughter. And Hades is like, cool. And at one point, Persephone is out picking flowers by herself, being the goddess of harvest. She is the goddess. Persephone is like the goddess of springtime and flowers, and picture like a really nice meadow that in summary is essentially what Persephone is the goddess of. And so Hades comes up from the underworld, abducts her, and takes her back into the underworld. And Demeter doesn't know what happened, and so she, flies all over the ancient Greek world trying to find her, and eventually stops at Eleusis, which is a city northwest of Athens. She is taken in by the king and queen, who don't know if she's a goddess, and for a couple nights she tries to make their son immortal, which gets, essentially how she does this is she sticks him in the fire. She coats him in ambrosia, which is this like god food, and sticks him in the fire, which is in theory going to burn away his mortality. The mom of the baby and the queen kind of is like, hey, what is happening with my baby, for like 2 nights? And then she watches Demeter and sees Demeter stick the kid in the fire and rips him out of the fire, and Demeter's like, you ruined everything. He's gonna be just this good hero, but you dishonored me. You have to build me a temple and all that. She also teaches their other son, Triptolemus, the gift of agriculture and the knowledge of how to do that, everything. And he is usually depicted with like a winged chariot, so I don't know how that connects to Demeter, but it somehow does. Usually she goes to Helios or Hecate, depending on the translation, and they are the sun and the goddess of magic, respectively. Good lord. And whoever she goes to, they're like, yo, Hades has your daughter. That's where she is. Demeter flies up to Olympus, like, yo, give me Persephone back, or I'm not gonna let anything grow. And Zeus is like, well, can't exactly do that. Promised her to Hades. Tough luck. And so Demeter, is like, cool, and nothing grows. And eventually the gods get so like, we're not getting our sacrifices, everybody's dying, that Zeus tells Hermes to go to Persephone. And Persephone, while in the underworld, it depends on the translation, but she either gets tricked or doesn't know the rule or something, and she eats pomegranate seeds from the underworld. And the thing about ancient Greece is they have this idea called Xenia, which is hospitality, essentially. And so since she has eaten the food of the underworld, she's a part of the underworld. And so when there's so many H names. When Hermes comes to the underworld, it's like, hey, you can come back up. She's like, cool. And then Demeter gets her, and he's like, hey, did you eat anything? She goes, yeah. Persephone admits to eating some pomegranate seeds, and Zeus is like, cool. So because of the laws of nature, you have to go back to the underworld. Because of other laws of nature, you need to be with your mother. And so, depending on the number of the seeds in the translation, she spends X amount of time in the underworld and X amount of time with her mom on Earth. So yeah, that's kind of the rise of seasons. And when Persephone is in the underworld, nothing grows. What's interesting is because of the way that Greece is set up, winter is like the good time for harvest and everything. That's like when the seeds are festering and it's wet and damp and it's good for the soil. But the summer, it's dry and hot and nothing grows. So when I was little, I would always assume, oh, when it's like September, October, November, that's when it's like October through like February, that's when Persephone's in the underworld, because I am from Oklahoma. I have a very North American view of things. So anyway, so in Greece, she's in the underworld when it's summer. So Eleusis, that city I mentioned, so Demeter and Persephone both get a cult there. It's like a joint cult. And it's called the Eleusinian Mysteries. And we have no idea what it did. All the worshippers, all the people who did it were sworn to secrecy. We know there were famous people who did it. Some of the Roman emperors did it. I'm pretty sure Plato or Socrates, one of the two, did it. So we know it was a thing, and we know it was very well known. But we don't know what happened at all. Well, we know some stuff. We know that it was voluntary, that pretty much everybody flocked to it. So essentially what happened was people were taken out of Athens and they walked toward Eleusis, which again is a couple miles northwest of Athens. It's more than a couple. It's, I think, like 14 or 15 miles. But during that journey, they were put on the outskirts of society. So they were teased. They were made to feel like an outcast. And then at Eleusis, they would go into the sanctuary. Something would happen. We don't know, because again, it's secret. There could have been like idols taken out. There could have been sacred food. There could have been something. We don't really know what happened in it. And then once that was all done and they were members of the cult, they would come back and they were brought back into society. And one of the theories is that it was used as a metaphor for Persephone, because you're getting taken out of your normal everyday life. So like her, when she lived with her mom, put through some sort of like strain, whatever, into a dark place, which was her in the underworld, and then re-emerging back into society as a changed person, which is coming out of the underworld. So I understand that. Oh, because of the whole thing with Hades and Persephone, she was closer to mortals, both because she's a goddess of agriculture, and she has a very intimate relationship with like mourning, and losing someone to death, literally, and also like theoretical death, which is like losing a child to marriage, because like once girls got married, they didn't really interact with their actual family anymore, which is kind of sad. She had other festivals. She has one called, I'm gonna butcher, Proestoria. And it's ritualized planting, and that was a couple days where people would just like help the soil out and sacrifice and all that. And then she had something called the Haloa, which is the fields, and it was after planting, and it was the protection of the seeds so they would have a good harvest. And then they had one called Themistophoria, which is kind of like the Eleusinian Mysteries, just a little bit. And the fact that they would walk to a sanctuary. It was 3 days long. They would walk to a sanctuary on the first day. They being all women. There was no men. And then they would fast on the second day and sacrifice and pray and all that. And on the third day, they would break their fast and pray for their own fertility. And there might have also been men there on the third day. That's the only thing about ancient cults is nobody tells us, and so we're like, this might have theoretically happened. I don't know. Demeter was cool. She is a lot more level-headed than her other counterparts on Olympus, which is not a high bar. But she's also the one that isn't running after Lord knows what. She's one of the, for me personally, she's one of those gods that is just like, she exists. Cool. Like, I have very strong opinions about Zeus. I have very strong opinions about Athena. I have very strong opinions about Hades. But Demeter is one of those that I'm just like, you weren't an objectively bad person. Thumbs up. As always, so I think that's it for Demeter at this moment. As always, we have our Instagram at Greek Speaks. If enough people want me to make a Twitter, I'll make a Twitter. But have a nice week.